Imagine walking into a grand medieval hall. Candles flicker against dark stone walls. Golden chalices sit on heavy oak tables. The atmosphere feels regal, prestigious, and ancient. But beneath the surface of this glittering world lies a darker truth. History is written by the winners, but it is branded onto the losers. Most family names tell a story of honest work. If your name is Smith, your ancestor was a blacksmith. If your name is Baker, they baked bread. But a select few names were born from something sinister. They were forged in the shadows of castles, sealed with broken oaths, and stained with the blood of kings. In the year 1215, after a brutal rebellion, King John of England decreed a punishment worse than death. The ringleaders would hang, but their families would suffer forever. They were forced to carry names that meant liar, coward, or backstabber. Today, thousands of people use these names proudly. They have no idea about the ancient curse attached to their identity. But one family carried a name so dangerous, even the king's executioner refused to speak it. We will get to them in a moment. First, let us look at how a single night of treason could brand a family line for 1,000 years. To understand how a name becomes a curse, you have to look at the power of a medieval oath. In the Middle Ages, your word was everything. It was a contract sealed before God. Breaking it did not just make you an enemy, it made you a monster. When a noble betrayed his lord, the punishment had to be absolute. Executing the traitor was never enough. The crown needed a permanent warning for anyone else thinking of rebellion. This is where the concept of the traitor's mark began. The crown would strip a family their ancestral titles and land. Then, they would legally change the family's surname to reflect their crime. Imagine the psychological warfare of this punishment. Every time a child was born, they inherited the shame of their ancestor's knife in the dark. Every time they introduced themselves, the world knew exactly what their bloodline had done. Take the surname villain, for example. Today, it sounds like the modern English word for a bad guy. In medieval times, it originally meant a low-born peasant or bondsman. But after a notorious uprising in Flanders, where a group of wealthy merchants betrayed their count to side with a rival French army, the count stripped them of their nobility. He reclassified their entire lineage as villains forever. Their wealth could not buy back their honor. The name stuck, turning a description of class into a permanent badge of dishonor. But peasant rebellions were nothing compared to what happened when kings were targeted. The stakes were higher, and the names became far more vicious. Let us move our story to the rugged highlands of Scotland. Here, clan loyalty was a matter of life and death. Betrayal within a clan was viewed as the ultimate sin. During the fierce wars for Scottish independence, a minor noble family was tasked with guarding a crucial mountain pass. They held the key to the entire kingdom's defense. A rival faction offered them a chest of gold coins to simply look the other way for one night. The family took the gold. Because of their silence, an entire army was ambushed and slaughtered in their sleep. When the rightful king reclaimed the throne, he did not execute the family. Instead, he forced them to adopt the name Campbell, which translates in Old Gaelic to crooked mouth. While some historians argue it refers to a physical trait, medieval law insists it was legally forced upon the treacherous faction to symbolize their twisted words and lying tongues. For centuries, carrying a crooked mouth meant you could never be trusted in business or war. Even today, certain branches of history enthusiasts look at that name and remember the ancient sting of a broken promise. It shows how a name can outlive the gold that bought the betrayal. But what happens when the betrayal is so deep, it destroys an entire empire? The next name on our list comes from the fall of one of the greatest dynasties in Europe. Imagine a battlefield covered in thick fog. The year is 1415. The Battle of Agincourt is raging between the French and the English. The French army vastly outnumbers the invaders. Victory seems guaranteed. But behind the scenes, a powerful French duke has secretly made a deal with the English king Henry V. At the climax of the battle, just when the French lines need reinforcement, the duke orders his cavalry to retreat. The sudden withdrawal causes mass panic. The French lines collapse, and thousands of knights are slaughtered in the mud. The duke's betrayal fractured France for decades. When the French crown finally drove the English out, they hunted down every remaining member of the duke's inner circle. They did not just take their heads, they took their identities. The descendants were forced to take surnames derived from the old French word manquant, meaning lacking or defective. Over the generations, this evolved into names like Morgue, which translates directly to with ill will or against the grain. To carry this name in Renaissance France was to be an immediate outcast. You could not hold public office, you could not marry into respectable families. You were a walking reminder of the day France almost fell to an English king. Yet there is a name even more common today that hides a similar dark origin. It is a name you have likely heard 100 times, completely unaware of its bloody roots. Think about the name, psychological weight of carrying a name that means the taker. In the feudal system, the most hated figure was not always the invading soldier. Often it was the insider who turned against his own neighbors. During the tax revolts of the 13th century, kings relied on local enforcers to crush resistance. If a village refused to pay, these enforcers would burn barns and seize livestock. They were traitors to their own communities, working for the oppressive crown. People labeled these men with terms that meant the greedy or the extractor. Over time, names like pucelle or bourgeois carried heavy stigmas in specific regions, shifting from simple descriptions of status to insults. If your ancestors took from the poor to please a tyrant king, the community made sure your children remembered it every time they walked through the village square. But all of these names pale in comparison to the absolute worst betrayal in medieval history. A betrayal so severe, it gave birth to a surname that people still fear to this day. We will uncover that final, forbidden name next. Our final stop takes us to the heart of the Holy Roman Empire, a powerful knight named absolute custody of a vital border fortress. He was the king's closest childhood friend, trusted above all others. When an invading army marched on the border, the knight did the unthinkable. He didn't just surrender the fortress. He opened the gates at midnight and led the invaders straight into the king's personal bedchambers. The king was captured, humiliated, and eventually executed. The knight assumed he would rule as a puppet king. But the invaders did not trust a man who would betray his own childhood friend. They threw him into a dungeon and left him to rot. The remaining loyalist nobles gathered to decide the fate of the traitor's children. They decreed that the family line could no longer use their ancestral name. They were given a new name, derived from the ancient Latin word for viper or poison. The surname was meant to warn anyone who met them that betrayal was running through their very veins. For generations, people with this lineage were forced to live in isolation, banned from cities, and forbidden from carrying weapons. The name became a synonym for a curse. Even today, variations of these snake names exist in European registries, hidden under centuries of spelling changes. The next time you look at a family tree, remember that history is not just a list of dates and battles. It is a living thing, carried in our blood, our stories, and our names. The names we carry today are a bridge to the past. Most of us inherit names of honor, hard work, or geography, but somewhere out there, thousands of people are walking the earth, completely unaware that their identity was bought with gold coins and a knife in the dark. They are the living legacy of medieval betrayals. Their names are the permanent scars of history, surviving long after the castles turned to dust and the kings were forgotten. Subscribe. See ya.